welcome back to Kellen on the mic, the third episode of this college basketball podcast, and the only college basketball podcast where the host, like Alabama last week, has never made a mid range jump shot in his basketball career. So let's get into the biggest news of this past week.
Run, Forrest, run! Run,
And it's not that I got a haircut, even though I finally did. I lost about 10 pounds, but that's actually not the biggest news. The biggest news this week in college basketball is that Bama. And yes, we are still a college basketball show. We're not talking about college football. They're the hottest team in the country right now, outside of obviously the two top heavyweights, Baylor, Gonzaga. Those teams haven't lost. But if you were to ask people around the college basketball world who the hottest team outside of those two would be, there'd be one resounding answer, and I think it would be the Alabama Crimson Tide, because these guys can score. Last week, right after we recorded our last episode, they played LSU. They put up 105 points on LSU on a record, an Alabama record, 23 made three-pointers. What is even crazier, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is that of those 105 points, not 1 point was scored, not right at the rim, a layup or dunk, at the free throw line, or a three-pointer. So you can see the trickle-down effect. And shout out to Norlander on the Eye on College Basketball CBS podcast. He talked about how in basketball it's a trickle-down effect. So things come from the NBA, and it takes a little bit to get to college, and then a little bit to get to high school. Whereas in football, it's almost the opposite. Things move up the ladder. Things come from college, they go to the pros. So the trickle-down effect is happening a little bit in the NBA. Everybody knows the NBA games change. It's more three-pointers, thanks to large part to Steph Curry. And we're finally starting to see that in college basketball a little bit. And there was no better example than the Alabama LSU game last week because, not one mid-range jumper made, and they scored 105 points. So it's obviously working for them. They have four players averaging over 12 points per game. Their best player is probably Bryce Petty, and he's a big-time shot maker. He's making he has made 21 of his last 36 threes in his last four games. Not bad a percentage. Josh Primo is a little Canadian shout out, kid from Ontario, didn't start for them in the beginning of the year. He's coming to his own as a point guard, has out of his best few games these past few weeks, was just named SEC Freshman of the Week. He's coming into his own. Bama's on a 10-game winning streak, including putting the dagger in Kentucky's season last night. First thing of the Forest Five, watch out for Bama. Secondly, I'm hoping not every week we're going to have to do this, but again, I want to keep everyone updated on the NCAA tournament. And we had some more rules come out. Shout out to Norlander again. He had a great Twitter thread. I'm not going to get to all of it, but I picked out the key points. The NCAA just released some updated rules for how they're going to try and keep the NCAA tournament safe. So all the teams within 350 miles of Indiana are going to have to travel by bus. So they're trying to limit air travel, which makes sense. That's limit people going in airports. It's a good idea, but the crappy thing for these teams is there's no eating, no drinking on the bus. So if you're 300 miles out, you're gonna have to make a few pit stops because it'd be a long time to go without eating or drinking. We'll see how much they stick to those rules too. But and then teams with high chance of getting an at-large bid will be asked to stay at their conference tourney location. So the big teams who everyone knows are going to make it are going to be asked to basically stay when they go to their conference tournament, stay there until they figure out where they're going in Indiana and just go right from there. So kids are going to have to bring all their homework with them, all their clothes. It's going to be an interesting time for these young kids. Going to be a lot of time in hotels, trying to get schoolwork done. So we'll see how it all works, but I understand why they're doing it, trying to make things safe, trying to give us an NCAA tournament. So let's hope it happens. And then finally, another wild point I saw is coaches will not be allowed to scout their next round opponents in person. You're not going to be able to go to the teams you might play in the next round. You're not going to be able to go to their games. All scouting will be done by video, which will be provided by the NCAA after teams advance. So we'll see how that affects games in the tournament. But again, we're going to be positive because at least we're going to get an NCAA tournament looks like this year. And from what I read, if they're getting people to stay at conference tourney locations, maybe the NCAA is thinking, because conference tournaments are still up in the air right now. I haven't heard anything definite from any of them, but it looks like we might be getting at least a majority of them. So that'll be good. Now, moving on to the player of the week, and I got to give some love out to Sharife Cooper. If you haven't watched this freshman play, another SEC guy, you got to do yourself a treat and watch an Auburn game because he's one of the most exciting players in college basketball. Marcus Carr is fun, but Sharife Cooper, he's right up there. He didn't make his college debut due to some NCAA eligibility issues until January 9th. But since January 9th, Cooper has only averaged 22.3 points per game, 8.7 assists, and 5.5 rebounds. So not bad for not playing basketball for a while. He had 28, 8, and 7 just last night in Auburn's win against the number 12 ranked Missouri Tigers. And he makes it must-see TV. He's incredible with the ball. And if he can develop even somewhat of he's still not great from outside, but he gets in the lane, he makes plays, he makes his teammates better. So if he's just exciting to watch, and he's gonna be must-see TV when Auburn takes on Baylor this weekend. I'll have more on that game in my picks. Fourth point, the barn is dead. And I feel bad because I led my 5 listeners, my 5 viewers astray. I had Minnesota. They were perfect 11-0 at the barn. I discussed it on the last pod, and 0-4 on the road. It was the perfect story. They never lose at home. They never win on the road. They weren't going to win the NCAA tournament because the NCAA tournament wasn't in the barn. But I thought they were a lock to beat Maryland. I put it on the pod. I put it on my Forest favorite of the week, and they let me down. And that's partly on me. I'll take part of the blame because I didn't know that Mark Turgeon, coach of the Maryland Terrapins, he's won 4 in a row in Minneapolis. So if anybody's immune to the magic of the barn, it's Mark Turgeon apparently. And I know that now, but I didn't know that last week when I lost a little bit of money on it. So the barn might be dead, but we'll keep an eye on it for the rest of the season. And lastly, we started a war on Chargers at the beginning of the year. This week, we are starting a war on bad camera angles. Because I don't know if anyone had the pleasure of watching the OK State Baylor game, sans Cade Cunningham, unfortunately, but I was visibly queasy at the beginning of the game because the camera angle was basically from the nosebleeds. I wouldn't be shocked if people needed to take gravel to watch the whole game because it wasn't comfortable, and it wasn't like a normal game. And I think we have to abolish that. I don't know if the OK State, I haven't watched a lot of OK State home games, if that's always been their camera angles, but if it is, they need to get it changed because I don't blame anyone that turned that game off because of the camera angle. So that's the Forest 5. A lot of SEC love there. Trying to get my SEC love in because I can't get any in Kentucky because they are still. The update on is Kentucky bad? The update is yes, they are still very bad. Will not be making the tournament unless they win go on a crazy one and win the SEC tournament, which I cannot see happening. So got to get some SEC love in anywhere. Bama, could they run the table in both basketball and football in the SEC? Stay tuned to find out. But let's move on to some picks. And we got a great slate of college basketball this weekend. We got the SEC Big 12 Challenge, so some out-of-conference games later in the season, which is always fun. But we got to start with a Big 10 matchup and on Friday, and it's Iowa, Illinois. And we're not going to pick the game because I don't have a strong feeling on who's going to win this game. I would probably lean Iowa if you want to pick both. But we're actually going to take the over in this game. And the over, you might be scared off. It's 165, but here's some stats for you. You have Iowa. You got the number 1 offense in the country going up against Illinois, the number 8 offense in the country. Both teams are averaging well below average time of possession in the offensive end. A lot of playmakers on each side. I think it's going to be up and down all night. I like a score in the high 80s for both teams. I think it's going to be tight. We're going to get some free throws at the end of the game. Take the over 165 in the Iowa-Illinois game. Now, let's move to the SEC Big 12 Challenge. I got the three biggest games, in my opinion, and I'll pick them all. And we're going to start with Baylor-Auburn. And last week wasn't great for the picks, but I'm giving myself a one-off because I picked Oklahoma State to cover against Baylor, but that was only with Cade Cunningham playing. He didn't play, so I'm not going to put that one on my record. So we're officially 2-3 on the show in terms of picks. So we're looking for a bounce back, and I think I'm going to go against Baylor again because Auburn is giving up 16 points, and I just talked about Sharife Cooper. Maybe Vegas isn't respecting him enough, and this Tigers team, they've won 4 of their last 2, and I just can't see Sharife letting the Tigers get blown out and losing by more than 16 points. So the kid is electric. I don't care how good Baylor is. Baylor's going to win this game, I think. They're too good, but I like the Tigers to at least keep it close. Take Auburn plus the 16 points. Now, Bama, Oklahoma. We're sticking with the theme, and I gave some SEC love, and we're gonna keep it going here because it's basically a pick'em game. Oklahoma has been playing well. I'll give them that. They just had big wins against Kansas and Texas. But what I said earlier, this Bama team is the hottest team in the country. They can score a bunch of points, and I just can't see Oklahoma, who doesn't have a lot of star players on their team. They're just an overall solid team, but they don't have a lot of top 100 recruits on that team. I can't see them keeping up with this Alabama team. Take Alabama in a -1, so basically pick them to win this game. So we're all aboard the SEC, except in this last game, Tennessee, Kansas. Both of the teams struggling. Tennessee has lost 2 of their last 3. They barely scraped out a win against an average Mississippi State team. And Kansas has lost 3 in a row. That hasn't happened in a long time. They hadn't lost 2 games in a row for some time coming into this season in the Big 12. They've now lost 3, but I like Kansas in the game. And because they still have a top 25 offense and defense, according to Ken Pom. And they're going up a Tennessee team who has really been struggling on the offensive end. Over their past 3 games, the Bulls are averaging 55 points per game. Yuck. That's not good for any team, especially going up against Kansas. They're not the Kansas of old, but they're still a good team. Marcus Garrett, still a great player. Abaji. Kansas has a get-right game Thursday against TCU. I think they're going to get their offense rolling. And Kansas is a underdog. They're getting +2 points. So we're going to take the Jayhawks +2 against Tennessee. And we're going to try and right the ship a bit. It was a bad week last week, but we're going to bounce back in a big way this week. Hopefully for a perfect 4-0. That's always the goal, and this is the week. I can feel it. That's our show for this week. Enjoy this week of college basketball. It's one of the best of the season. SEC Big 12 Challenge. Enjoy, and until then, as always, survive and advance.